So, what was it like when I was actually like in the quote unquote real Space Command, which was the Air Force Space Command, but I mean, it's really the precursor of the Space Force.
This is the presentation of the Space Force.
So you know President Trump's plans for a Space Force? Turns out they may have some trouble getting off the ground.
You'll have the Space Force.
That's where it's at, space.
It is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space.
Look at the mountain. I'm gonna tell you today about my time in the Space Force. So, back in 2013, middle of 2013, I was what you could call, or what you might call a NEET, which is somebody who just doesn't have any employment, there's no education, there's no training going on. Today, I own 2 properties here in Colorado Springs. I'm a licensed realtor. I'm making tons of cash, having a lot of fun, doing all that crazy stuff. So how did somebody who is a total shut-in become somebody who is, seemingly has everything, that's with the American dream? It all started with my journey in the Space Command, which is now known as the Space Force. So 7 years ago, I was sitting in my room gaming, just playing video games, doing all this stuff, shooting games stuff. And my internet went out. Now at the time, I didn't have any money. I was selling avocados on the street for cigarettes. Back when avocados wasn't even a craze. So that's like 2 cents or something. And so I'm like, Mom, I need internet. And so she's like, okay, honey. And she called the AT&T, and then the AT&T guy ended up coming. Free, but it's submit to myself that if I hurt someone else, then I'll never see just what I'm meant to be. Come on, let's go. The AT&T guy, he shows up to my house and he's like, hey, I'm gonna install the internet, this and that. And I start asking him questions because I'm kind of curious. Hey, so how did you get into this business? Is AT&T a good place to work? He's like, yeah, man, I think AT&T would be right for you. You're kind of a nerd. And I was like, haha. And it really hurt my feelings, actually. But then he's like, you know what I did before this? I was like, what? He's like, I was in the Marine Corps. I was killing people. I was like, what? Word? He's like, yeah, but I'm gonna send you an application for AT&T, but he sent me that stuff, but in reality, I was pretty dead set. And so the next morning, I was like, Mom, take me to the recruiter's office. And she's like, what does that mean? I'm like, I'm gonna join the military. She's like, military? Don't tell me that you're gonna join the military. But that's what I ended up doing. And so I went over to the recruiter's office, and I was like, eeny, mini, miny, mo, catch a tiger by the toe. And I landed on Air Force. If my finger had been 1 inch to the right or 1 inch to the left, I'd be in a completely different place. I might even be dead right now. I might be in the Marines. I could have been in the Army doing some craziness, digging a ditch and then laying in it, being comfortable with a bunch of other dudes. Anyway, here I am. I get over to Texas. I do my basic training stuff. Honestly, at the time, it was pretty scary, but it's not a big deal. That could be a whole nother episode or a whole nother video. The real interesting part began once we got out of basic training and then we went into technical training. What to expect when you're going into the Space Force for technical training is they're gonna send you to California, and it's gonna be from 3 to 6 months depending on what your satellite system is going to be. So you're familiar with GPS. Everybody uses GPS to figure out where they're going, but that's only one system of satellites. There's so many other different kind of satellites that do completely different functions. Some of them have to deal with messaging or military communications. Some of them have to do with taking pictures in space. Some of them have to do with any number of things you can think of. There's probably some sort of satellite that does it. And so for me, I was originally in military satellite communications, and that's what I did for a number of years. Now I was in the mobile section, and so it meant that I had to not only operate the satellites, but then I also had to know how to use a gun and be armed while I was operating the satellites. And we go, you know, all across the world, all across the country, doing that kind of stuff of operating satellites in all these different locations. That was a pretty cool job. But then I went over to this job of being an orbit analyst, and that was much more complicated, much more technical. There's a lot more involved in my brain, I suppose, but I feel like I'm getting a little sidetracked here. Going back to California. California was a really cool time in my life because you get there and you get to meet so many people. For the first time in 2 months, you get like a tiny modicum of freedom. And so that means you could go off a base if you want to. You could get a car. Usually we had like one person with a car, and that was the person that was driving us around. But the friends that I made in California in Space Camp out in Vandyland, aka Vandenberg, those friends are gonna be with me for the rest of my life. And I think that's really one good thing that can happen to you when you join the military, and especially the space world, is that you stay really interconnected with the people that you make a bond with early on, because it's a small world in space. And so you're gonna be starting out somewhere like one place, and you'll probably see these same people, 10 or 15 people, for the rest of your career, even if y'all are going in different directions.
Where are we going?
Hell if we don't pray. Hell if we don't pray. Hell if we don't pray. My videographer, she looks good right now. It's like, why did look at me? You know, I got a big old womb broom. Got a big ass caterpillar on my face.
Let's zoom in on that caterpillar.
Would you fuck me?
Back in the Space Force, when I got into the actual, what my job was gonna be, it was kind of divided out into 12-hour days when we were actually doing operations. So we would come in at like 6:30 a.m. and then work doing like sending commands to satellites, looking at telemetry, which is just like the metric data that comes down from space, and like a host of other actions. Sometimes we'd have to put out fires, you know, metaphorical ones. A couple times, I would say 2 times, I had to put out real fires, like there was like an actual fire because of an equipment failure or something like that. But for the most part, you know, everybody there, we're just like, honestly, just like a bunch of nerds. It was like me and like 30 other nerds in one place doing satellite operations. Like you would think that it would be like a bunch of super geniuses and like a bunch of smart engineers and all this stuff, but in reality it's like the dude who, it's like your leader guy, your captain, whatever, he fucking likes to get drunk on the weekends and he plays Call of Duty. And then, you know, the other one, they all play D&D, like, you know, Dungeons and Dragons. So that's kind of what you can expect culture-wise in the Space Force, is just a lot of nerd behavior. I'm not gonna say that I was excluded from that at all, because I was doing that as well. That's kind of what it's like being in the Space Force. I did that for 5.5 years, and I could keep talking at length as to all the crazy shit that I went through. At one point, I was accused of doing drugs, and they almost kicked me out. And that's gotta be a whole nother video. But there were so many challenges and so many struggles that I want you guys to be as prepared as possible going into this decision and going into this new branch that nobody knows anything about. Is that there's gonna be a lot of times where you're bored out of your mind, but you have to remain vigilant because you're dealing with $1 million equipment. Like, it's not easy sending stuff to space. It's not like we could just send somebody over there to fix what's wrong. It's literally whatever you do is gonna affect the satellite or whatever space system that you're using is really important. So, you know, this is espinorealty. This is being posted on this channel, but I think if you guys want to know more specifically about what actually goes on in the Space Force, you know, aliens, all this stupid crap, UFOs or whatever they're calling it now, you know, you could definitely talk to me about it, and I'll let you know, all right?